goes, folks. Video 2 in the nitrogen cycle. Well, look, it's Bambi and Thumper. Nice. Well, we have Bambi and Thumper. We have a tree and grass. And what do they all have in common? They are all living, which means that they have nitrogen. And the major form of nitrogen is going to be the proteins and the DNA, which all life tends to have. Now, where do they get those proteins and nitrogen from? Well, fortunately, there's nitrates, which remember is the form that producers use to convert this form of nitrogen into proteins and DNA. And plants take it up and they turn it into the proteins which make the leaves and do the transport and all the things we talked about before. Now, Bambi can get its protein from eating the plants. Bambi eats the grass and breaks down grass proteins into amino acids, rearranges them and to make Bambi proteins, and the same thing to make DNA. Now, unfortunately, at some point, Bambi and Thumper too, unfortunately, is going to die, just as the trees, the grass, myself, yourself, everyone, all life. That's one of the things, unfortunately, that we tend to run out of time on this planet. And oh, look at that, just all squished down there. So now Bambi's officially a roadkill. Now, when things die, they decompose. And one of the things they break down to initially is ammonia. All the proteins, primarily they lop off an amino group, it's called, which forms this stuff called ammonia. And the bacteria that do that carry out the decomposition, are called, what a surprise, decomposing bacteria. Now, these decomposers are very helpful. Remember, FBI, recycle, fungus, bacteria, invertebrates, and right now we're talking about the bacteria clearly. Okay, once the ammonia is around, that then gets changed back to nitrates again. And what accomplishes this is another group of bacteria called nitrifying bacteria. And to be honest, we could pretty much stop right here, that nitrates, we're back to nitrates, gets taken up by the plants, forms protein, DNA, first order consumers, Bambi-ish type folks, and even second orders like ourselves, and we convert their proteins, our proteins, but eventually they all die again. They break down ammonia, nitrates, proteins, ammonia, nitrates, protein, and we can keep going on because it is a cycle. So that's pretty cool. So this actually is what 90% of all ecosystems do in terms of cycling nitrogen around. Remember, unlike energy, which is lost, nutrients can get recycled around. Now, there's still that stuff called atmospheric nitrogen we haven't touched bases on yet, at least in this discussion. And atmospheric nitrogen, remember, is the form that critters can't use very easily. But fortunately for us, there's a group of bacteria that can do this. And one group of them actually live in the roots of certain types of plants. They form these little root nodules down here where it's both bacteria and plant living together in a very mutualistic way. In fact, it's called symbiotic mutualism. And what they can do is convert N2, this free nitrogen nobody can use, into nitrates. And these guys are called nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Very helpful. And so now we can add one more piece to this, which is another way of getting nitrates. Now, unfortunately, there's one last piece to this, and this is what happens sometimes, where nitrates go back to N2, which from our standpoint is not a good thing, because now it's being brought back into a form that most critters can't use, except for, of course, our buddies down here, the nitrogen-fixing bacteria. And if I click this, and actually they're called denitrifying bacteria, but if I click this now, this kind of summarizes everything here in terms of the nitrogen cycle. Again, the major part is going to be nitrates to plants, then to the animals. Plants and animals die, they decompose, form ammonia, back to nitrates again. But we do have some coming in from the nitrogen fixation, and we have some nitrates being lost via the denitrifying bacteria.